It's all I have left of where I came from. They don't tell you what the end feels like. When you're young, you imagine it will be loud, screaming in the driveway, tears on the kitchen floor, a slammed door echoing through an empty house. You think there will be a clear moment, some great cinematic explosion that leaves you certain, this is it. This is how it ends. But the end of my marriage didn't come like that. It came quietly. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, in the stillness between errands and dinner, when the house smelled faintly of coffee grounds and last night's takeout. It came while I sat alone at our kitchen table, staring at a laptop screen I'd opened out of habit, not suspicion. I sat in the darkened kitchen, my laptop glowing like some cruel oracle, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. It wasn't the first time I'd checked the security cameras, but it was the first time I couldn't breathe while doing it.
Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from.
At 48 years old, after 2 decades of marriage, 2 kids, 3 houses, countless sleepless nights and one carefully constructed life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, humiliation. My hand shook, but I couldn't stop staring at the screen. It wasn't just what I saw. It was how comfortable he looked, barefoot, in swim trunks I bought him for Father's Day, the same ones I'd seen crumpled at the foot of our bed this morning. It was the way he leaned in, like he was fully at ease in a life that no longer seemed to include me. My mind betrayed me with flashes of our beginning. I remembered the night we met, him offering me his jacket outside a bar because I was shivering in my cheap dress. The way his fingers brushed mine when he slipped the ring on at our wedding, his hand trembling as though he couldn't believe I'd said yes. The sound of his voice when he promised me forever, soft and certain, like it was the easiest vow in the world to keep. I had built my life on those moments. I'd put my career on hold for him. Moved for him, pushed my body through 2 pregnancies that nearly broke me. I'd learned to live with his late nights, his working weekends, his silences when the stress got too heavy. I told myself love was sacrifice. That all those little bruises on my soul were proof I was strong enough to endure them. And for what? I could hear my own breath in the silence of the kitchen, shaky, uneven, like I was the one drowning in it all. I wanted to storm out there, to scream, to tear it all apart. I wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting me. But I didn't move, because some part of me knew that if I walked outside, I'd be walking into a different life, a life where the man I'd built everything around wasn't mine anymore. So I stayed. Watching. My marriage ended that day, and he didn't even know it. Not with a fight. Not with screaming. Just with me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a glowing screen and whispering his name like a curse I'd never thought I'd say that way, Daniel. The man I'd built my entire life around. The man who looked happier without me than he ever did with me. And the worst part? He didn't even look guilty. I am Rachel Morgan, wife of Daniel. I met Daniel when I was 26. He was ambitious, broke, and hungry for success, a man with more charm than money, the kind of man who could make you believe in the impossible just by looking you in the eye. I was fresh out of grad school, my own dreams buzzing inside me like electricity, ready to be shaped into something meaningful. We didn't have much in those early days. Just mismatched furniture in a 1-bedroom apartment and a shared conviction that we were building something bigger than ourselves. Daniel used to joke that one day we'd tell our kids about the ramen years, how we lived on cheap takeout and ambition. I thought those years were romantic. Proof of our grit. Proof of us. I put my career dreams on pause to support his. It wasn't supposed to be forever. Just until he got on his feet. He promised me that when his business took off, it would be my turn. So I became the steady ground beneath him. I built our home, not just the walls and the paint colors, but the life inside it. I raised our children while he climbed the ladder. I learned to smile at his bosses at company parties, to make small talk with their wives, to play the role of the supportive spouse who didn't mind staying in the background. Every ounce of stability in his life had my fingerprints on it. I was the one up at 3 a.m. with colicky babies, whispering lullabies in the dark so he could get enough sleep for his big meeting. I was the one who packed his suitcases for business trips, folding shirts with the precision of someone who believed in his mission. I was the one who reassured him through the bad quarters, the layoffs, the nights when he came home defeated and silent, staring at the floor as if he'd failed us all. And I believed in him. God, how I believed in him. I told myself that's what marriage was. You hold the line when the other person can't. You pour yourself out for them because you know they'd do the same for you. Except, he didn't. Somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped looking at me like I was his partner and started looking past me, like I was just part of the foundation, necessary, but invisible. He had built his empire on the back of my sacrifices, and when he finally had the view he wanted, I wasn't beside him anymore. I was behind him, fading. I used to wonder, in the quiet hours of the night, what my life might have looked like if I hadn't pressed pause on my dreams. If I'd chased my own career instead of pouring everything into his. Would I have been someone? Or had I been too afraid to imagine myself without him? Now, sitting here with the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest, I can't help but think, I gave him everything. And somehow, I gave him everything. And somehow, it was still not enough. By Wednesday evening, life looked deceptively ordinary. Daniel came home late, the same way he always did, loosening his tie at the door, muttering a distracted hello, his phone in his hand as though it were an extension of himself. He didn't look at me when he said it, his eyes locked on the screen, thumbs still moving. Just a quick work trip, love, he said casually, zipping his suitcase on the bed with that easy confidence that had once made me feel safe. I'll be back before the weekend. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely, watching him the way I always did before he left for these trips. Do you need me to pack anything else? I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. No, I've got it, he said, not glancing up. His hands fussed over his shirts with more care than our conversations had seen in weeks. That cologne again. The expensive one. I noticed it but swallowed my comment. Maybe it was a client dinner. Maybe it was nothing. I told myself not to read into things. But I did. My eyes wandered to the details, the navy suit draped neatly over the chair, the suitcase I'd chosen for him last birthday, the faint scuff on his watch he hadn't had last week. Always glancing at that watch. Always somewhere else. Don't wait up, he added lightly, as though it were nothing at all. Don't wait up. I'd heard it before, but this time it landed differently, sharp, almost rehearsed. I forced a small smile, the kind you wear when you're not sure if you're being reassured or dismissed. Safe travels. He kissed me on the cheek, quick and perfunctory, and I let him. I didn't close my eyes like I used to. Love you, he said. Love you too, I replied automatically, my tongue heavy with the words. I watched him leave, the door closing with that soft, familiar click that used to mean nothing at all. And then I was alone again, in the quiet house I had built for us, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the half-packed laundry basket in the hall, wondering why everything felt slightly off. It was a normal night. Or at least that's what I told myself. I didn't know it was the calm before the storm. The house felt different without him. Not quiet, Daniel and I had known quiet before, but hollow. Like a stage after the actors have left, props still in place, waiting for a story that would never resume. I'd told myself it was a normal night. But as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I knew I was lying. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the villa seemed louder, every shadow sharper. We had bought this place years ago when Daniel's business first started taking off, close enough to the city for his work, but far enough to feel like an escape. I'd fallen in love with it the moment I saw it, the warm stone exterior, the tree-lined drive, the way the evening light filled the kitchen like a soft embrace. I thought of it as our forever place, a sanctuary where our children could grow up safe, where we could grow old together. But lately, even the villa felt foreign. Like I was living inside someone else's dream. I gave up on sleep and wandered barefoot through the house, letting my fingers trail along the cool hardwood as I passed the framed photos in the hallway, our wedding day, the exhausted joy of holding our newborns in the hospital, vacations by the ocean, Christmas mornings in matching pajamas. I paused at a photo of us at the beach, the kids still little, Daniel kneeling behind me with his chin resting on my shoulder. I tried to remember what it felt like to be that woman, sun-warmed, loved, certain. But I couldn't. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and made tea I didn't really want, just to keep my hands busy. The quiet was heavy, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the settling walls. That's when my eyes drifted toward the office. I hadn't checked the cameras in months, why would I? This villa had always felt safe, our little world tucked away from everything else. It wasn't just a house, it was the dream I had poured myself into. I had chosen every detail, the warm stone exterior, the sprawling garden where I pictured our kids playing, the soft light that filled the kitchen in the evenings. This place was supposed to be our refuge, the proof of everything we'd worked for, the forever home where love would always live. But as I stood there in the silence, that comfort felt distant. A flicker of curiosity crept in. Maybe I'd look at the feeds, just to make sure everything was as it should be. That's what I told myself. Just curiosity. My bare feet patted softly against the floor as I crossed the hallway, my pulse quickening with every step. The office felt colder than the rest of the house, the way rooms do when they hold things you've been avoiding. I sat at the desk, staring at the laptop. My hand hovered over the lid, frozen. I told myself I was just checking. That I was being silly. That it was nothing. But my gut, that sharp, relentless thing, said otherwise. I drew in a long breath, letting it out slowly, my fingers trembling as they brushed the lid. Still, I hesitated. Because once I opened that laptop, I couldn't unsee whatever waited for me. Finally, with a shaky exhale, I flipped it open. My fingers were cold against the keys as I navigated to the feed. And as the screen flickered to life, my heart slammed against my ribs, because deep down, some part of me already knew I wasn't going to like what I saw. Our villa was my safe place. My inheritance. My name on the deed. A little sanctuary I kept alive while Daniel chased promotions and new titles. It was mine before it was ours, a place I had poured my own history into, fresh paint on weathered walls, lavender by the windows, late summer evenings spent with a book and a glass of wine while cicadas sang in the distance. But tonight, my instinct screamed, check it. I sat at my desk, staring at the security feed login, my finger hovering over the trackpad. My pulse drummed against my temples. This wasn't the first time I'd had the thought. Over the last year, there'd been little flashes of unease whenever Daniel announced another work trip. The way he'd hesitate when I asked where he was staying. How vague he became when I asked who he'd be meeting. My questions were always deflected with a smile, a kiss on the cheek, and a rehearsed reassurance, don't worry, love. It's just work. But this time I didn't want reassurance. I wanted the truth. With one steady breath, I typed in my password and clicked through the camera feeds. The familiar split-screen layout blinked to life, hallways, kitchen, patio, pool. Every pixel of that house had been preserved under my care, my quiet effort. At first, everything was still. Silent. I almost laughed at myself for expecting to find anything. Maybe I'd finally gone mad, unraveling from too many years of pretending I didn't notice him slipping away. Then I saw movement. On the patio. I clicked to enlarge the feed. There he was, Daniel, barefoot by the pool, a bottle of wine sweating between two glasses on the table. His shoulders loose, his smile wide, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. And next to him. Her. She was younger than I expected. Early 20s, maybe. Long, tanned legs stretched out on one of my lounge chairs, her body angled toward him like the two of them were sharing secrets. Her laugh, even without sound, was bright and unrestrained, cutting through me like glass. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. I leaned closer to the screen, my throat tightening, my hand covering my mouth like I could stop the soundless sob building inside me. I didn't need to hear their words. The intimacy was in their body language, the way he leaned toward her, the casual touch of her hand on his arm, the ease between them. They didn't belong there. She didn't belong there. And yet, they looked like they did. Like I had been erased, and this was their life now. My villa. My sanctuary. My inheritance. My husband. A slow, numbing calm spread through me, the kind that comes just before something inside you snaps. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen, watching the life I'd built quietly unravel before my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 22 years of loyalty shattered with a single image. I thought of every late-night dinner I ate alone, staring at his untouched plate while the food went cold. Every anniversary he worked through, sending me flowers instead of showing up. Every time I told myself, this is just how marriage is. Be patient. He loves you in his own way. But love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't look like him pouring my best wine for a girl who probably still has a student ID in her purse. Love doesn't look like laughter and bare feet by my pool, the same pool I'd scrubbed clean before our last family barbecue, the same pool our kids learned to swim in. The betrayal burned hot in my chest, but beneath it was something colder. Clarity. It wasn't just an affair. It was the quiet rewriting of our life. While I kept our world standing, he was out building another one, piece by piece, lie by lie, until I was just the scaffolding, holding up a house he didn't even live in anymore. My hands hovered above the laptop, trembling but steadying with each breath. 22 years. I'd spent more than half my life giving him everything. My body. My youth. My dreams. My patience. And now? Now I had nothing left to give. I closed the laptop gently, as though shutting the screen could contain the fury inside me. But it didn't. It only sharpened it. This wasn't going to end with me crying on a kitchen floor, begging for answers. No. Daniel had taken enough from me. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I wanted. To take something back. He'd forgotten who I am. This was my villa. My home. My life. And I wasn't going to be erased. The keys were cold in my hand. I slipped them into my bag, the familiar weight grounding me as I moved through the house one last time. The walls felt closer, the air heavier, like even the house understood what I'd seen. I paused in the hallway by a family photo, the four of us on a beach years ago, Daniel's hand resting on my shoulder like he owned me. I touched the frame lightly, not for him, but for her, the younger me, still believing this life was unshakable. Never again, I whispered. Outside, the night was still and heavy. My car waited in the driveway like it had been holding its breath. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel, my knuckles whitening. The drive to the villa blurred by in a rhythm of headlights and fury. No music. No noise. Just me, the hum of the engine, and a single thought that pulsed with every mile: this ends tonight. The gate code was muscle memory. The iron bars swung open, groaning like reluctant witnesses. The villa came into view, glowing beneath the moonlight. My sanctuary. My inheritance. And now, my crime scene. I parked off to the side, cutting the engine, letting the silence press in. From this distance, I could already hear it, faint laughter carried on the breeze. Her laughter. I sat there in the dark, staring at the warm light spilling from the windows. My pulse slowed, my thoughts sharpened. Daniel had thought he could erase me. But he'd forgotten one thing. You can't erase the foundation. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Through the hedges, I had a clear view of the patio, my patio, lit with the soft glow of lanterns. Daniel was there, shirtless, his shoulders loose, his head tilted back in laughter. And next to him, sprawled across my lounge chair like she'd earned the right to be there, was her, draped in my silk robe, holding my wine glass in her perfectly manicured hand. They looked comfortable. Like they belonged. The sight hollowed me out. I watched for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Long enough to memorize the shape of their betrayal, long enough to burn it into my memory so I could never, ever pretend I hadn't seen it. The calm returned, that same dangerous stillness that had carried me here. This wasn't my home anymore. Not like this. I turned away before they could see me, before they could look up and catch me staring at the ruins of my life. I walked back to my car, each step measured, deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove away, gripping the wheel so hard it hurt, the villa shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared altogether. It wasn't running. It was reclaiming. Because tonight, I'd buried the version of me who stayed quiet. Who accepted scraps. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I would start building a new life, one that didn't have Daniel in it. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. The night stretched around me like an endless tunnel, headlights carving out a thin path in the dark. My hands ached from how tightly I gripped the wheel, but I didn't loosen them. If I did, I was afraid I'd unravel right there on the road. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a shell. Four walls packed with memories that suddenly felt like lies. I left the car running as I stepped inside, the hum of the engine carrying into the kitchen. It felt safer that way, knowing something was still moving, alive. The house was silent. I wandered through the rooms like a stranger, letting my fingers drag over the counters I'd wiped 1,000 times, the furniture I'd picked out carefully over the years. I should have felt pain, but all I felt was distance. Like none of it belonged to me anymore. In the bedroom, his side of the bed was still perfectly made. That used to comfort me. Now it just mocked me. I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. My face was pale, eyes rimmed red, but there were no tears. Not anymore. I was emptied out, scraped raw. Okay, I whispered to myself. My voice sounded foreign. Steady. Okay. This wasn't going to end with me collapsing on the floor. It wasn't going to end with begging or bargaining or any of the tired, desperate scripts of women who let themselves be broken. No. This was the beginning of something else. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a worn leather folder, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the documents that proved what Daniel seemed to have forgotten: the villa was mine. So was this house. The accounts with my name on them, the things he'd convinced himself were his by default. I placed them on the desk in neat stacks, each paper a brick in the wall I was about to build between us. Daniel thought he was untouchable. Tomorrow, he'd learn otherwise. I crawled into bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling as the first hints of dawn crept through the blinds. I wasn't sure yet what I'd say to him. Or if I'd say anything at all. But I knew this: he'd walk back into this house thinking he could smooth it over, thinking I'd let it slide. And that was going to be his first mistake. By the time the sun rose, I wasn't the same woman who had stared at that camera feed the night before. I was sharper. Clearer. The ache was still there, a deep, hollow pain in my chest, but it no longer controlled me. It had crystallized into something else. Resolve. I brewed coffee in silence, the familiar hiss and drip of the machine grounding me. Every movement felt deliberate. The stirring of cream into my mug. The soft click of the cabinet as I closed it. Even my breathing, measured, steady, felt like an act of defiance. This wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. If Daniel thought he could humiliate me quietly, then I would dismantle him quietly. I carried my coffee to the desk where I'd left the folder open the night before. The documents were waiting, a quiet reminder of what was mine. The villa. The house. The accounts. The investments. All the things Daniel had convinced himself he'd earned, forgetting whose name had made them possible. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years. My father's lawyer. The one who had handled the villa when it passed into my name. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a moment, I almost hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of mourning. Because pressing that button meant admitting there was no coming back from this. Then I pressed it. His voice was warm, familiar. Rachel? It's been a long time. I need to review my holdings, I said. My voice was calm, businesslike. And I need to make some changes. Today. We talked for nearly an hour. I listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions I never thought I'd have to ask. By the time I hung up, the foundation of my next life was already forming. Daniel thought I'd stay where he left me, waiting, small, powerless. But this was my house. My name. My life. And I was done waiting. When I finished my coffee, I didn't wash the mug. I left it on the counter, a deliberate mess in the pristine kitchen, proof that I'd been here, awake, alive, planning. Let Daniel come home. Let him walk in with his excuses and his hollow charm. This time I wouldn't be the one blindsided. By the time Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, I'd been awake for hours. The house was spotless. Breakfast was on the table. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it always had. That was the point. I heard the familiar sounds of him coming in, the soft thud of his suitcase by the door, the rattle of his keys on the counter, the low hum of him whistling like a man without a care in the world. The sound of someone coming home from a work trip. Rachel? His voice carried into the kitchen, casual, warm. You're up early. I didn't look up from my coffee. Couldn't sleep. He came in with that easy smile, his shirt slightly wrinkled from travel, hair tousled just enough to look believable. He bent down and kissed the top of my head. You should have called me, he said, his voice low, familiar. I would have talked you back to sleep. I watched him move through the kitchen, pouring coffee, humming, acting like the man I used to know. He was good at this, good at pretending. Daniel, I said softly. He turned, coffee mug in hand. I met his eyes. Do you want to share anything with me? For the briefest moment, something flickered across his face, surprise? Panic? Then it vanished, replaced by that charming, boyish grin. Share? He chuckled, shaking his head. What do you mean? Of course not. Unless you count how much I missed you. He crossed the room and leaned down, kissing me like nothing had changed, like he hadn't been shirtless by my pool with her. And I let him. I let him believe I was still blind. Nothing at all? I asked, tilting my head, casual, like I was only half serious. Nothing at all, he said without hesitation, brushing his hand over my shoulder. You worry too much, Rachel. I smiled, the same smile I'd given him for years. Maybe I do. He kissed me again, longer this time, and I stayed perfectly still, my performance as practiced as his. Because Daniel didn't know. He didn't know I'd already seen everything. And he had no idea that while he was pretending to come home, I was quietly preparing for him to leave. The moment Daniel left the kitchen, I let the smile fall. I heard him upstairs, the thud of his suitcase on the bed, the faint squeak of the closet door as he unpacked. Humming. Always humming, like his conscience was clean. My hands were still wrapped around my coffee mug, but they were trembling. I hadn't even noticed until now. I set it down slowly, deliberately, and pressed my palms against the cool countertop, bowing my head as if I could steady myself by sheer will. For a moment, the quiet of the house became unbearable. He had walked in like nothing happened. Like I hadn't watched him sipping my wine, wearing that easy smile for someone else. He'd kissed me with the same mouth he'd used to whisper to her. And I'd let him. My chest ached, hot and heavy, and before I could stop it, a sound escaped me, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, just something raw and broken that had been sitting under my ribs for too long. I pressed a hand over my mouth, biting back the tears that were already burning my eyes. No. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not where he could hear me. I pushed away from the counter and walked quickly down the hall to my office, shutting the door behind me. I leaned against it for a long moment, letting the weight of it all press against me, letting myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time since he came home. My hands found my face, covering it, and for a few minutes, I let myself feel it all. The betrayal. The humiliation. The fury. Then I straightened. I went to the desk, smoothing out the papers I'd left there, deeds, account statements, all the quiet proof of what was mine. My tears were drying, leaving only salt on my skin and steel in my spine. Daniel might still be humming upstairs, blissfully unaware of what I'd seen. But this was no longer his house. No longer his life. And very soon, he'd know it. By the time I stepped out of the office, my face was dry. Daniel was still upstairs, humming to himself as he unpacked. It was almost funny, how easy this was for him. How easy it always had been. I moved quietly through the house, the rhythm of my footsteps steady, measured. I didn't feel like Rachel the wife anymore. I felt like Rachel the strategist. On the kitchen table, I laid out the folder from yesterday, deeds, accounts, investment records, all in my name. The villa. The house. The accounts I'd kept untouched for years. It was all mine. And now it was going to stay that way. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd called the night before. My lawyer. My father's lawyer, the one who'd handled everything when the villa became mine. I dialed. "Good morning, Rachel," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I've been expecting your call." "Morning," I replied, my tone flat, even. "I want to move forward with the changes we discussed." "All of them." "Understood," he said. "I'll draw up the documents." "When would you like to sign?" "As soon as possible." We went over the details, the asset transfers, the account separations, the legal protections I hadn't needed before but now couldn't afford to ignore. I scribbled notes as we spoke, my handwriting firm and deliberate. When we hung up, I set the pen down and stared at the list I'd made. Step by step. Piece by piece. I wasn't just surviving this. I was reclaiming everything. Upstairs, I heard the shower running. Daniel was probably smiling in the mirror, thinking he'd pulled it off. Thinking I was still blind. I glanced toward the sound and, for a moment, let the smallest of smiles curve my lips. Let him enjoy the illusion a little longer. Very soon, it would be gone. The house smelled of soap and steam by the time Daniel came downstairs, freshly showered, hair damp, wearing the crisp casual clothes of a man who believed his world was intact. He smiled at me like he always did after a trip, that easy grin he'd perfected over decades. "You didn't have to make breakfast," he said, grabbing a piece of toast. "I was going to take you out tonight. Make up for being gone." I smiled back. "That sounds nice." He kissed my cheek before heading into his study to check emails, humming again. Always humming. I waited until I heard the door click shut before I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my banking app. The accounts were still there, the ones he didn't know about. The ones in my name only. I initiated transfers, moving money into places only I could reach, securing what was mine. Every tap of my finger felt like taking back a piece of myself. Next came the villa. I emailed my lawyer. Proceed with securing the property. Remove his access. Change all codes and locks. My hands didn't shake. When that was done, I printed copies of the deeds and statements, tucking them into a plain folder and slipping it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Insurance. Daniel had always liked to think of me as steady. Predictable. Let him. Let him think nothing had changed, that his little performance still worked. Because while he went about his day, humming in his study, blissfully unaware, I was quietly dismantling his safety net, brick by brick, signature by signature. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. When this was over, he wouldn't even see it coming. By late afternoon, the house had settled into its usual rhythm, Daniel in his study, tapping at his laptop between calls, me in the kitchen with a book I wasn't reading. But it wasn't the same. Not for me. Every tick of the clock felt heavier. Every creak of the floorboard, every faint hum of his voice in the other room felt like living with a ghost, a man who didn't realize he'd already been exorcised from my life. Around 4, he wandered into the kitchen, stretching his arms. "You've been quiet today," he said, leaning casually against the counter. "Just tired," I replied, not looking up from my mug. He studied me for a beat longer than usual, his smile faltering at the edges. "You sure you're okay?" I met his eyes and offered the same warm, practiced smile I'd given him for years. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" He hesitated, then kissed my temple and murmured, "Good. I hate leaving you for so long."
I'll make it up to you. And just like that, the charm was back. I watched him walk away, every step of his retreat echoing in my head like a countdown. When he disappeared into the study again, I turned back to my phone. Another email to my lawyer: proceed with freezing the joint accounts. I'll need updated documents for review. Then I opened my notes app and wrote out a list: assets, accounts, passwords. My life on paper. All of it shifting, quietly, into my hands. Daniel thought I was the same Rachel who used to wait at home, smiling, accepting his excuses. But that Rachel was gone. This one didn't wait. This one planned. And when I was done, he would come to understand what it feels like to lose everything without ever seeing it coming. That evening, I stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup, my motions slow, deliberate. Behind me, I heard Daniel's footsteps. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. "You're quiet," he said, his voice light but searching. "More than usual." I didn't turn around. "Just tired. Long day." He walked over, resting a hand lightly on my back. "You've been saying that a lot lately." I smiled at the soup, not at him. Maybe I'm just getting older. It was the kind of answer that ended conversations. For years, it had worked. Tonight, it didn't. Daniel hesitated, then circled around to face me. He searched my expression, as if looking for a crack. "Rachel," he said softly, "is everything okay?" I set the spoon down and finally met his eyes. My face was calm, serene, practiced. "Everything's fine." Something in him didn't quite believe it, I could see it in the slight furrow of his brow. But he smiled anyway, slipping back into the role he played so well. "Good," he said, kissing my forehead. "I hate it when something's bothering you." And then he walked away, humming again, as if my mask had fooled him completely. But I saw the way he glanced back at me before leaving the room. The first crack. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and returned to my desk, opening a new email draft to my lawyer: "Finalize everything. I'll be ready to sign." I stared at the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence, then typed another line: "and make sure the villa locks are changed by Friday." When I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. Daniel could hum all he wanted, could play the part of the devoted husband, but the walls were closing in, and he didn't even know it. By Thursday morning, everything was in motion. The villa locks, changed. The joint accounts, frozen. My personal assets, secured under my name alone. The lawyer had drawn up everything I'd asked for: separation documents, property filings, and an airtight financial restructuring that left Daniel with nothing but his own salary. I had been Rachel the wife for 22 years. Now I was Rachel the architect, rebuilding my life while dismantling his. But I wasn't finished. Daniel's business trips weren't just personal betrayals. They were lies woven into his career, expenses, favors, and meetings that had nothing to do with work. He used his position like a shield, believing his charm would make everyone blind. He was wrong. I'd kept every receipt, every email, every calendar entry. Quietly. Methodically. The paper trail of his affair was a tapestry of professional misconduct. And today, I tied the last knot. I slid the folder into a sleek black envelope and addressed it to the one person who wouldn't ignore it: the managing partner of Daniel's firm. The subject line was simple: "For your review." Inside, proof of his work trips, complete with hotel receipts in his name, time-stamped photos from the villa's cameras, and copies of his falsified travel reports. I didn't need to write an explanation. The documents spoke for themselves. By noon, the package was hand-delivered to his office. But here's the twist Daniel would never see coming: the envelope didn't just contain proof of his affair, it contained proof of everything. The off-the-books client dinners, the falsified reimbursements, the little gifts he'd charged to the company. Every secret I'd quietly collected over the years, every whisper of misconduct, compiled and annotated in a neat dossier. Enough to destroy his career in one sitting. By the time he realized how deep this went, he'd be fighting for more than just his marriage. At home, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine he used to save for special occasions and sat at the kitchen table, my table, watching the clock. By evening, I heard his car in the driveway. The hum of the engine died, but for a long time, he didn't come inside. When the door finally opened, Daniel stepped in with a look I'd never seen on him before, pale, tight-jawed, almost dazed. No humming. No easy smile. He didn't say hello. "Rachel," he said finally, his voice low, measured, "we need to talk." I took a slow sip of my wine, my eyes never leaving his. "Do we?" He flinched at my tone. For the first time in years, he looked small. That's when I knew, the envelope had been opened. The bomb had gone off. And Daniel Morgan had finally learned what it feels like to be blindsided. Daniel stood there in the doorway, still holding his briefcase like it was a shield. His silence was almost satisfying. "Rachel," he said again, his voice tighter now, "what did you do?" I swirled the wine in my glass lazily, as if we were just chatting after dinner. "Me? I had a productive morning." "You?" His jaw flexed. "Don't play games with me." I finally set the glass down and leaned back in my chair. "You should really be more specific. There are so many things I could have done." His composure cracked, just slightly. "You sent it, didn't you?" I tilted my head. "Sent what?" His eyes narrowed. He wasn't humming now. He wasn't smiling. He was finally seeing me. "The folder." I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just let the silence stretch between us until he filled it with his own fear. "You don't know what you've done," he said, but the tremor in his voice told me he knew exactly what I'd done. I stood slowly, deliberately, and closed the distance between us. For a moment, he looked like he might step back, but he didn't. "You spent years underestimating me, Daniel," I said softly, almost kindly. "And now you're realizing your biggest mistake wasn't the affair." He blinked, caught off guard. "And what was that?" I smiled, a sharp, cold thing. Thinking I wasn't paying attention. His breath hitched, just barely, and for the first time I saw it, fear. "You'll ruin me," he said. I picked up my glass again and took a slow sip. "You did that all by yourself." He opened his mouth like he had more to say, some excuse, some desperate attempt at control, but nothing came out. I walked past him, toward the staircase, leaving him standing there with his briefcase and his unraveling life. "Dinner's on the stove," I said without looking back. "Eat while you still have an appetite." And then I left him in the kitchen, silent, broken, and finally aware that the game had changed. I could hear him pacing in the kitchen as I climbed the stairs, his footsteps sharp and uneven against the hardwood. "Rachel." His voice cut through the house, louder now, edged with panic. "You can't just." I stopped halfway up the staircase, hand resting on the banister. "Can't just what, Daniel?" He appeared at the base of the stairs, his tie loose, his hair a little disheveled, the carefully composed man from this morning now fraying at the edges. "You can't send something like that to my firm," he said, his tone teetering between anger and desperation. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I turned to face him fully, calm as ever. "Oh, I think I do." His nostrils flared. "This isn't just my job. It's my reputation. My career. You're dragging my name through the mud." "Your name?" I let out a quiet laugh. "No, Daniel. I didn't drag your name anywhere. You did that when you started using company money to fund your little vacations." His face flushed crimson. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about." I descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The falsified reports. The reimbursed expenses. The off-the-books client meetings that never existed. "You really thought I wouldn't keep track?" He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the flicker of panic in his eyes. "You've spent years lying to me, Daniel. To them, to yourself. But here's the difference between you and me. He swallowed hard. And what's that? I don't need to lie. His hands curled into fists at his sides, his voice lowering. You're going to ruin me. I tilted my head. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. I just sent the receipts. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing hard, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time, and realizing I wasn't the woman he thought he could manipulate anymore. Then he whispered, almost to himself, you don't want to do this. I stepped past him, brushing his shoulder as I moved toward the front door. You keep telling yourself that. As I reached for my coat, I heard him behind me, his voice quieter now, shaky. Where are you going? I slipped my arms into the sleeves and opened the door. To sign some papers, and before he could say another word, I walked out, leaving him alone with his panic, his silence, and the sinking realization that the life he'd taken for granted was already gone. Daniel didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing in the study, the floorboards groaning under his weight, the occasional sharp clatter of a pen or glass hitting the desk. Every so often, his voice cut through the house, hushed, frantic phone calls to colleagues, to someone at the firm, to anyone who might save him. By morning, the charm was gone. The easy grin replaced by a hollow, gray look. He came into the kitchen like a man walking through wreckage. They suspended me, he said flatly. No greeting. No preamble. I took a sip of my coffee, unbothered. Good morning to you too. His jaw tightened. Do you even understand what that means? My career is over, I finished for him. Yes, Daniel. I understand perfectly. His hands curled on the back of a chair. You don't know what they'll do with that information. They'll investigate? I offered, tilting my head. Probably. Which means they'll find everything I gave them. And then some. His nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. Because he knew I was right. While he unraveled, I built. By midday, I was in my lawyer's office, signing the stack of papers that would sever our lives cleanly. Separation agreements. Property transfers. Updated account authorizations. Once these are processed, my lawyer said, sliding the final page toward me, everything tied to you will be untouchable. I signed with a steady hand. Untouchable. When I got home, Daniel was still in the study, slumped at his desk, staring at nothing. He didn't even look up when I walked in. For years, I'd been the one left waiting, for his calls, his attention, his love. Now he was the one waiting. Waiting for a phone call that wouldn't save him. For an apology I'd never give. For a life that no longer existed. I stood in the doorway, watching him silently. The man who had once thought he was untouchable was crumbling in front of me. And for the first time in 22 years, I felt free. By Friday morning, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because I'd lost it, but because I'd outgrown it. I'd spent too many years walking these halls as Daniel's shadow. Quiet. Steady. Predictable. I wasn't any of those things now. The movers arrived just after sunrise. They were efficient, quiet, the way I'd requested. No questions. No chatter. Just the systematic dismantling of the life I no longer wanted. Daniel emerged from the study as they carried the first boxes out. His voice was hoarse, ragged. What is this? I didn't look at him. It's exactly what it looks like. He moved closer, blocking my path. You can't just leave. I stopped, finally meeting his eyes. Daniel, that's the last thing I need your permission for. His mouth opened, then closed again, like he was searching for the right script but couldn't find his lines. We can fix this, he said, but the words were hollow, desperate. Whatever this is. I'll talk to the firm. I cut him off with a quiet laugh. You still think this is about fixing us? You still think there's an us to fix? He flinched. I leaned in slightly, my voice low and even. You burned that bridge. Then you built another one with her, using my money, my house, my life. And now? You're standing in the ashes wondering why I won't hold your hand. He swallowed hard, but I didn't wait for a response. I handed him a single envelope, my copy of the separation agreement, signed and dated. This is the last piece you'll get from me. His fingers shook as he took it. Rachel. I picked up my purse and walked to the door, pausing only once. The locks on the villa were changed this morning. The joint accounts are gone. The house is mine. You'll get what the paperwork says you get. Nothing more. He stood there, small and silent, as I opened the door. Then I stepped outside, the sunlight warm on my face, and closed the door behind me. No screaming. No tears. No begging. Just an exit, clean, deliberate, and final. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was walking toward something new. 2 weeks later, I woke up to sunlight spilling through unfamiliar curtains. My new apartment was smaller than the house, cozier, quieter, free of ghosts. The walls were bare for now, but they felt like a blank page instead of a cage. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up wondering who Daniel was with, what lie he'd tell, or how much of myself I'd have to sacrifice to keep the peace. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, still getting used to the way my footsteps echoed in this open space. I brewed coffee, mine, just the way I liked it, and sat at the little breakfast table I'd picked out myself. No place settings for two. No waiting for someone who didn't deserve my time. I opened my laptop. An email from my lawyer confirmed what I already knew: the separation was finalized. The accounts were secure. The villa, locked and untouchable. Daniel had tried to call. I hadn't answered. There was nothing left to say. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the quiet settle around me. Not the hollow, suffocating quiet of my old life. This was different. This was peace. On the counter sat a stack of brochures from local art studios and community programs. I'd signed up for a ceramics class that started next week, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time, or permission, to pursue. I caught my reflection in the window, no makeup, hair loose, a softness in my face I hadn't seen in years. I smiled at myself, not the practiced one I'd worn for him, but something real. The door to my old life had closed. And in its place, 100 others had opened. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't someone's wife, or someone's safety net, or someone's foundation. I was just Rachel. And that was enough.